Good morning, church. Welcome to this edition of Checking In with Pastor Jim. And let me just remind you, I'm checking in today, but I'm not checking in tomorrow or the next day or the next day. I'm going to take a few days away and see if I can actually get some rest. It's been a really busy season of my life, this coronavirus season. And even though I'm not doing some of the things I used to do, I feel like I'm doing more of the things I have never done before to try to keep First Baptist Church up and running, to keep people connected to one another, to help us go deeper in our love for God and wider in our love for neighbors, and to come out of this crisis better and stronger than ever before. I'm exhausted. So, going to take a few days away, and I hope you'll be okay. I know that tomorrow, Patrick Jackson is checking in with you. I believe it's Patrick on Thursday. And then on Friday, Ralph Starling is going to do the morning check-in. On Saturday, I'm giving you and me the day off. And on Sunday morning, I will see you for worship, but not for coffee and donuts. Those of you who love the coffee and donut hour will just have to wait till next week. Sorry about that. But thank you for wanting me to get a little bit of rest. I hope you can get the same. It's Wednesday, it is the 22nd of July, and I'm thinking today about this. Back to school. Because I know that there are lots of people out there wondering, how will we do that during a global pandemic? I've been hearing from mothers who are really struggling with what to do. And I've heard from teachers who are really struggling. I know of some school administrators who are wondering what to do. And I've talked with some kids who would really like to know what's going to happen this fall. So let me say, first of all, my heart is going out to those school administrators, the people who have to make decisions about when and how to open school safely. They're hearing from governors, from presidents about what they need to do, but they must be thinking on this ground level, how do we actually do that? And how do we do it in a way that is safe? I know just the conversations we've had about reopening First Baptist Church for in-person worship have been lengthy and detailed. We have tried to cover every possibility to make sure that it's safe when you come back. School administrators are having to go through that kind of thing. For the teachers, of course, so difficult. They want to do what they are called to do. They want to teach. And yet the scenarios that have been presented to them look very bleak and very different from usual. My wife, Christy, was teaching kindergarten, and that last semester, when she was doing so much of it virtually, was the hardest teaching she's ever done. She retired at the end of that semester. That was already her plan. But she keeps saying to me, my timing was perfect. My timing was perfect, because she's hearing from former colleagues who are trying to figure out how to go back to school under these conditions. Almost impossible. I'm thinking about kids who might have to go back to school and try to figure out, how do I sit 6 feet apart from my classmates? How do I learn in this environment? How do I interact with my teacher? What will I do if I ever get to the playground? And of course, the younger kids are going to have a hard time remembering that they're supposed to maintain social distance, right? Christy's classroom was a hugging classroom. She hugged those children. They sometimes hugged each other. It would take a while for them to unlearn that behavior, just like it might take us a while to unlearn it at church. And then I'm thinking about the parents. God bless those parents, the ones that I heard from yesterday, read these long email messages from moms in particular who are wondering, how do we do this? And what about households where both parents are working? You know, does one of them stay home to try to help the kids navigate this complicated educational structure? Do both of them stay home? Do both of them go to work and leave the kids to fend for themselves? What about single parents who are trying to get their kids to school and also get themselves to work so that they can afford to feed those kids and clothe those kids? Wow, it's tough. And I don't think I have ever felt it quite so deeply until yesterday, reading those emails from those mothers and recognizing for them, this is huge, huge. So, first things first, I want us to be in prayer for all of those people I just mentioned. In fact, let's pause right here for a moment and say a prayer. Dear God, be with school administrators, be with teachers, be with parents, be with children, be with decision makers at every level, and help them to make good decisions for all of those involved in this whole educational system. I'm asking it in Jesus' name because we need Jesus' help. Thank you. Amen. All right, moving on. This is what I would recommend. And I'm thinking about my brother Ed as I say this. Ed is the oldest in the family. He has blonde hair. We never knew where that blonde hair came from, maybe some distant relative. But of all the brown-haired Somerville boys, there's Ed, the oldest, pink-cheeked, blonde hair. He married a beautiful girl named Debbie. Together they had 8 children. I'm not even sure I can count that. 8 children that they had together. One about every 2 years. They're not Catholic. They just believed that God would give them as many children as God wanted to give them. And God wanted to give them 8. So they have these 8 kids. But when I visit in their household, at least when their children were younger, every one of those children had responsibilities at home. Ed and Debbie quickly figured out that they were outnumbered and that they needed some help from their kids. So these children very dutifully performed the chores that had been assigned to them. One of them would have laundry duty, which was a huge job in a household like that. One of them would have responsibility for supper, maybe in a given week, somebody else for lunch, somebody else for breakfast, somebody would mop and sweep the floors, somebody would make the beds. That whole family knew that they were in this together. And my brother Ed was good about sitting down with his family for family meetings and saying, look, this is what it's going to take this week for the Somerville family to survive. It got even harder when they went to Mexico as missionaries. Ed's kids are all very tall. He married a woman who had tall genes in her family, and so his pink-cheeked children grew to 6 feet, 6'2", 6'4", all of this in Mexico, where most people are a little over 5 feet and darker skin. It was an interesting comparison between Ed's kids and all the kids they played with in the neighborhood. Anyway, life was harder there. And Ed had to say to his family, he and Debbie together sat down, called a family meeting and said, look, if we're going to make it here in Mexico, this is what I'm going to need from all of you. So I'm wondering about that kind of approach for families who are facing this educational nightmare this fall. Could they just sit down together, parents and children, and say, look, your father and I have been rowing this little boat that we call our family, and we've been rowing hard, and you've been enjoying the ride. But right now, the boat has sprung a few leaks, and we're going to need you to help us bail out the boat if we're going to keep it moving forward. We don't want this boat to sink. We're going to need your help. I believe that children could respond very positively to that if they knew that they were needed to help out. And I don't know what it's like in individual families. If you've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, that's one thing. But if you've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, that might be something else. If you're a single parent with a kid at home, or 2 or 3, then even more important to say, all right, family, we're all in this together. How are we going to do this? How will we survive this? And don't be surprised if your kids have some very good ideas about how to make things work. Kids are brilliant. You made them that way. You gave them your genetic information. They're brilliant, and they are willing to help out. I believe that, especially if you can impress upon them the fact that this is an extraordinary time. We've never been through anything quite like this. This is a crisis in the nation, it's a crisis in the world. And we need all hands on deck, all right? So, kids, help us bail, help us row, help us navigate, help us get to the other shore. You have to help us. We, the parents, cannot do this on our own. I believe, and I don't know your family, but I believe that that kind of appeal could make a huge difference in how you approach this crisis. Because I believe that if you approach it together, it's going to be better. If your kids think that parents are in the house only to provide food and clothing and shelter and education and entertainment, this is not going to work out well. But if they really believe that they are part of the solution to this problem and that they each have their place in this family, I think you could come out of this really better and stronger than before, with everybody feeling like they have contributed to the solution. So that may be the best advice I've got today, other than my first advice, which is to pray. Pray hard for administrators and teachers and parents and children and for leadership at every level to make good decisions. But also to do this, to sit down with your family and say, okay, how can we get through this thing together? I would love to be able to provide for the families at First Baptist Church all the resources they need to make it through this time. There is only so much I can do and only so much we can do, but we can be praying hard for parents and children and teachers and administrators. And let's do that. Let's be faithful to that. If you don't believe prayer makes a difference, then you don't believe. But if you do, then pray. Pray hard for all of those faced with this particular crisis. We're going to make it through even this. We're going to look back on this at some point next year, the year after that. We're going to say, do you remember that? Do you remember how hard that was? Do you remember how we made it through? Because that's who we are. We're not people who give up. We're people who go forward. God bless you, everyone involved in this educational system. And God bless you, parents and children. May this year be a year that you remember forever, and remember in some ways very fondly. Bless you now. And bye until what? Next week. See you then.